Hello, welcome to another episode of ARC's TravelConnect virtual series. I'm Jennifer Watkins, Director of Payments at ARC, and today I'm joined by Michael McNamara, Vice President at Mastercard and Global Solutions Leader with Mastercard SpendPulse. Welcome, Michael.
Hi, thank you very much for having me today.
I got to tell you, it's great to have Mastercard here. You've been a great partner to ARC and to the industry, so it's a pleasure to have you. I think we want to jump right into just having you start with a brief introduction of yourself. Tell us about your career a little bit and what your current role is.
Terrific. Well, again, thanks for having us. It's always great to work with you. And so I've been at MasterCard for about 20 years now. And basically, about 19 years ago, I had the concept of could you take the aggregate data that runs across MasterCard and build better ways of monitoring and forecasting consumer spending, specifically as it relates to travel, as well as other areas of retail. Now, what we did was we learned very early on, if you just take the raw data that runs across MasterCard, you end up getting skewed based on different things that are happening at MasterCard's business. So we had to build a methodology that would debias the data and use it as an input into our modeling process. We also take other data sources from third parties that include non-MasterCard information, so that all the information that we produce with SpendingPulse is our estimate for overall sales across all payment forms. So hopefully today what we can do is spend a little bit of time walking you through what the SpendingPulse data is showing, and get you up to speed on trends and other variables that can help your business.
Yeah, that is great. It's a pleasure to have a payment expert here for one of our Travel Connect sessions, because payments has been such a hot topic, and actually trends right now. Very interesting to see what's going on in payments right now. So I'm going to hand it over to you, and I'll let you share what you've got.
All right. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to walk through, again, some of the latest information we're seeing regarding overall spending. I want to give you just a quick input into consumer spending in general, and then we're going to spend obviously most of the time talking about travel. But I thought we'd do a quick recap first just on what we've been seeing through the month of January regarding overall spending. Now, from overall retail sales and consumer spending perspective, January spending was resilient. We had a couple of headwinds that impacted the month. However, overall, U.S. retail sales continued to do relatively well, showing positive growth rates throughout the month. Early in the month, we had to deal with difficult comparisons with a year ago. There was the $600 stimulus payments that started to go out at the end of December in 2020, but then impacted January 2021. So that was something that just created a difficult comparison environment. Obviously, we're going to talk about a bit more is we had to deal with increasing COVID cases that put a bit of a damper on retail activity in general. And we also had a couple of weather events. There was a winter storm that impacted the eastern part of the country in the middle of the month. You can see there's a bit of dip there from a growth perspective. And you can also see that basically, if anybody, I'm actually calling in from Boston today. We had a real humdinger of a blizzard that happened at the last weekend of the month of January. So that negatively impacted sales a bit too. But in spite of all these issues, sales did relatively well. I just want to show you here, this is some new capabilities that we have where we're able to track retail sales at a geographic standpoint. You can watch weather systems as they move across the country. So I just wanted to show a highlight here of January 15th through the 17th. You can see the storm that developed and then impacted in the middle of the month, impacted the Midwest, moved into the Southeast, and then up the East Coast. You can see when there is weather that does impact things, that does change consumer behavior. In-store activity takes a hit, and overall retail sales, you can see a suppression of growth rates for a period of time. Now, as we look into the future here for retail sales before we shift over to travel more specifically, we are expecting to see some increases from a year-over-year growth standpoint as we move through the middle part of February. This is in part due because we're going to be comparing against the freeze that impacted Texas last year. That was around right around Valentine's Day that came through, and that significantly suppressed sales last year in the middle of the month. That actually impacted the national growth rates as well. So this year you're going to get a bit of a payback from that on a positive side. And then as you move through towards the end of the quarter, you're going to compare against the second stimulus action that was larger, the $1,400 payments that again create difficult comparisons with March of 2021. And so there could be a little bit of a headwind there. You also have a later Easter this year that could pull some sales activity, both in retail as well as travel activity from the end of March into April of this year. So with that, I just wanted to stop. Are there any, if you have any questions that are specific around retail in general, before we get into the travel sectors themselves?
I do not have any. I mean, I think it's kind of easy to tell from what you've just shown that during COVID, because we've had so many sort of unique things happen, unlike a normal year, you have all these unusual things that kind of mess up your numbers, I guess.
There are a series of, I can give you just a quick window because the headlines that you see from retail and some of the economic releases can be a little bit volatile. I'm pretty much sticking to year-over-year growth rates, which we can explain and are pretty straightforward. There are some surveys that are put out from the government that do provide what we call seasonally adjusted month-to-month growth rates. And those growth rates have had a lot of trouble dealing with COVID. Mm-hmm. And so you get pretty wild gyrations from month to month. And that can generate some really volatile headlines in the news. So just as an example, the seasonally adjusted month-to-month government read in December was actually a negative read, even though basically all of the retail ecosystem saw a very good holiday season. The government retail sales number for December made people think that things weren't that good.
Mm.
So
interesting.
You got to be careful when you're seeing different headlines. Try to read between the lines and then see how things are going. In general, when you go through the consumer in the United States and you go through the health of the consumer, you're basically checking all of the positive boxes. Elevated savings rates, positive. You have a very strong employment environment. Wage growth is showing good signs of increases that are helping to offset some of the inflation that we're seeing. So when you look really across the board, the U.S. consumer is in very strong position with lots of dry spending powder if you as you start 2022. So hopefully that'll be good for the travel season as we hit the spring and then the summer as well.
Yeah, sounds great. All right, I think you're going to move into travel. Yeah, this is great.
Yeah, so I wanted to show another view here. This is showing year-over-year growth in sales for the airline sector. And I just started at October of last year through January. And you can see the growth rates are rather extraordinary here because you're comparing against extraordinarily low activity in the previous year. So you're seeing growth rates that are north of 100% versus a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a couple things here in this view. You can see the dip that occurred really starting in more or less mid-December. I mean, you can actually say it kind of started a little bit before that. And then you start to see some recovery in airline sales as you move through the second half of January. That coincided with the increases in Omicron cases across the country, especially we had a lot of peaking of those cases that occurred in January. They're coming down now. So I think the airline sales numbers are positive as you see them start to recover. And then that's on the consumer side. Also, the hope is that a lot of the back to office programs got delayed basically into March. So the hope is that as you start to see more folks going back to office, that tends to coincide with business travel. And you'll start to see some pickup in business travel as well as you move towards the end of Q1.
Mm-hmm. That would be nice.
I think everybody would like to see that. I know a lot. Our salespeople really want to get out on the road again and see the customers face to face. Zoom calls are terrific, but they don't replace the in-person interaction. Now, I want to show this as well. This is showing daily airline sales. And you can see here that I went back further in time, and you're looking at 2019. And then you can see 2020, obviously, the huge declines in March and April that came through. And then you can see the recovery that occurred as you got into 2021. Although I wanted to show you here, I just drew a line around $150 million per day in airline sales. That was where you could cross that threshold, very, very frequently, almost every week, and before the pandemic. You see, since it really broke out, we've just had a couple of periods of time where we've gotten above that threshold. But you can see right when we start to get above it, then Delta came in and knocked things down again for a period of time. Then we started to get above it again. Then Omicron came in, knocked it down. Now, hopefully, we'll trend back up. And as we move through the year, we'll get to something more, a more normal level of sales, which will get us back above that $150 million per day. The lodging numbers, I want to show this as well. Now, this is looking again, going back from the beginning of October through January. And you can see that, again, the numbers are elevated here. The comparisons are not quite as easy in lodging as they are in airlines, because even during the pandemic, people would drive to different locations and stay in hotels. So the lodging numbers didn't fall as hard as the airline numbers did. You can still see those 60% plus is a significant recovery from where we were a year ago. And then you can see, though, in here that, again, more or less the same period of time, the hotel numbers started to erode here. You're still seeing good growth, but they're not. The growth rate started to ease. That overlapped again with when the COVID cases start to spike again. Now, you can, if you remember the airline numbers, you start to see those start to perk back up. That tends to be a good thing, because when someone is planning a trip and making their airline sales, those sales tend to go through before the trip actually occurs. Whereas some of a lot of the hotel numbers or sales don't actually occur until the trip occurs. And so airline sales, if you see them start perking up, that should be a positive leading indicator for the lodging sector. So hopefully we'll see some good numbers as we move through the spring season, spring break season. And then as we get into summer travel season again, hopefully we'll start to get some more normal activity. We can get some more international travel going again. And that will start to help the overall sector.
Yep, sounds great.
Yeah. Now, as I think I've shown before, but we do have for lodging, we do have some capabilities in terms of tracking things geographically. This is just showing the past 4 months or so on a state-by-state basis, year-over-year growth. Now, the growth numbers are a little bit skewed because everything's up versus, pretty steep declines back in 2020 and early 2021. But you can see here that Florida, is showing some relative to other states is showing some pretty good growth. And you can see some of the other states, are either outperforming or underperforming in general, but the entire country is up quite a bit.
So can you extrapolate anything from that about, I don't know, like Florida? It's interesting. Nebraska's in there or near the top. New Mexico. I mean, is assumptions people just are wanting to travel there now, I guess?
Well, I think some of it is because of what we call the base effect from a year earlier. Yeah, okay. So some of these markets really got hit pretty hard. So their growth rates are up a little bit more, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're booming. It means that sometimes it's just a reflection of how weak they were a year earlier.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting.
Now, in Florida's case, it's probably a little different. Florida's doing pretty well.
Yeah. It's because you don't have to get a COVID test to go there.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, once you're, I have different friends and colleagues that go from New York down to Florida, and they say it's almost like a different world regarding the policies in the different areas there.
Right.
Now here, I just wanted to show we have projections for lodging sales, and I want to show here through that it just kind of extends it through the end of the month of March. Again, middle of February here, the models are expecting some elevated year-over-year growth rates. Again, part of that lift, part of that is, COVID hopefully coming down. But the other thing is that you have very easy comparisons in a very large portion in and around Texas with the freeze that happened last year that was very disruptive. So the same way that I showed you the retail sales numbers going up, some of the lodging numbers are likely to show some more significant increases in February, in part due to the weather conditions that disabled travel last year.
Mm-hmm.
And then I want to show a little bit longer view here. So this is looking through what the models are expecting through the end of 2022. Again, I'm looking at lodging here, and you can see once you see that big bump, in February, you can see the numbers coming back down to earth. And as you move into the summer, the numbers start to go back into the positive, but you're looking at positive single digits as opposed to the rather extraordinary growth rates that we've seen over the past year.
Mm-hmm.
So, 5%, 8%, that's where you start to live. There's going to be, again, when you get into December and then January, you're going to have some easier comparisons with Omicron and Delta. So we have to just keep that in mind as well. But in general, you're looking at a more this is kind of a path towards more normal when we come to growth rates, and hopefully more normal in terms of dollar values. And again, hopefully we'll see the return of business travel in a more robust way, as well as the return of international travel, which will hopefully bode well for the overall sector.
Mm-hmm. So it's not that the number's low there; it's just that it's evening out, which is a good story for us getting through the rest of the pandemic.
Absolutely, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I did want to show, this is just using Ireland as a sample here for international travel. And here I'm just looking at tourism spending that occurs in Dublin, as well as in Ireland overall. And you can see if you go back a year ago, the numbers were crushing here. Tourism spending just wasn't really happening. And then when you go to Q4, you can see the growth rates are rather extraordinary. Again, part of this is because you're seeing a base effect with very easy comparisons with a year earlier. But you can see that the numbers are going in the right direction. And again, if we can start to get some of the testing mandates and other things for international travel, some relief on that, then hopefully we'll start to see some better numbers coming out. Mm-hmm. You can see the U.S. Tourism spending from U.S. tourists obviously was down tremendously in Q1 2021. It was almost nothing really happening. So now you're seeing really enormous growth rates off of very small bases, but you still have a ways to go before you're going to really surpass pre-pandemic levels. And when that occurs, if we can, fingers crossed that, if everything goes well, maybe we would be in a position to start talking about that happening in the summer. I think there's probably quite a bit of pent-up demand still there. As I mentioned earlier, the U.S. consumer is in very strong position. And if we can get a more normal environment, hopefully we can get some better bookings going both ways.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that because, the people I talk to, pent-up demand is a real thing. And so I was going to ask you sort of, as you look at the numbers, do you factor in pent-up demand somehow?
Well, in terms of the growth rates that we're seeing there, to a degree, the models will take that into account. We use a whole series of macroeconomic forecasts of different variables that will go into the numbers there. So it's a path towards getting back to normal when it comes to dollar levels. Like I showed that $150 million a day. We want to get back up to that threshold, and if we can get some relief from not having, another extensive variant come through, and we can start to get some relief in some of the controls, health-related controls, safety measures that have been taken. We do think that we can see a similar rebound in travel that we saw in some of the other retail sectors when they were kind of unlocked from COVID over the past year.
Yeah. So question for you. I mean, because ARC's got a lot of data, and we're constantly changing how we evaluate and the analysis we do on that data, the customers that ingest it, the reports we want to generate out of it, the sales, how we sell the data. So SpendingPulse has been there for a long time. How has that evolved, and who do you see as your main customers for that, for the information you share?
Sure. Yeah. As I mentioned, started this quite a while ago. When we first started, kind of first generation of SpendingPulse, we would have a series of reports that would come out once a month that would provide a snapshot, kind of monthly values for year-over-year growth. What we've been able to do more recently is we've actually had a significant upgrade. We just kind of call it next generation SpendingPulse, where some of the views that I showed you, we're able to now track sales really every day. We can see weather impacts, we can see event impacts on sales as they occur, and we're able to forecast different things that we couldn't forecast before. So the increased frequency, increased forecasting, increased geographic granularity is really unlocking a lot of use cases for different customer groups. So you would ask who the customers tend to be within the travel sectors, airlines, as well as lodging, hotel companies. And then you also have, in the broader sense, the merchant community in general, retailers, et cetera, that would use it. And then you also have the banks, governments are consumers of the information as well, as well as different media sources. You might see us in the press from time to time.
Yeah, I think I have seen some of your. There's some videos out there of you speaking to on various news programs and the different news outlets.
Oh yeah. I did that quite a bit for a while, and now we have much more. I would say, I'm very happy to say we have much more accomplished spokespeople that speak on SpendingPulse's behalf nowadays.
Okay, so would you say that for the future, the plan is just to bring in more of that data, or what's the future plan?
So where we're going with SpendingPulse, over the course of the next year, we are launching these next generation capabilities across multiple markets. So we can see get a window into the economic health of the consumer and the retail as well as the travel sectors. We just in Q1, we are launching across Europe. So I believe this week we actually just launched across 6 countries in Europe, and more will be coming at the end of the quarter. Australia, South Africa, and other markets around the world are also on the country expansion list. So that's really exciting. We're really very excited about that. And then another variable that is another feature that's coming online is we have these new abilities to analyze, quantify, and forecast the impact of events. So everything from football games to concerts to national holidays or festivals, we're able to now quantify the impact of those events and forecast them so that we can start to rank when we know we're going to see surges in activity in different countries or even different markets or cities, even different zip codes, when we can start to see when we're going to see increases in consumer activity. So those are really exciting capabilities that are really just starting to get unveiled, and they really open up a whole new world in terms of analytics.
Yeah, sounds very interesting to see. Even I'm thinking of New Orleans, like during Mardi Gras, or wherever you are. There's got to be lots of money going in at certain times of the year, and it'll be interesting to be able to predict what that looks like going forward. Well, Michael, thank you very much for joining us today.
Mardi Gras is on our list.
Is it? Good.
Of things for studying.
Good. Well, thank you for joining us. Really appreciate you sharing your insights with us, and also thank you to the people who are watching this episode. If you would like to view more episodes, visit TravelConnect.com to see more TravelConnect videos. Thank you.
Sounds great. Thank you.